Michael had always thought his marriage to Laura was unshakable. They'd been together for 8 years, owned a cozy home in Austin, Texas, and had traditions they never skipped: Sunday barbecues, movie nights, and annual road trips down the Pacific Coast Highway. But lately, something had shifted. Laura was suddenly working late, more often, sometimes not coming home until well after midnight. When she did, her voice was tired, her touch colder than usual. Conversations at the dinner table turned into brief exchanges about bills or grocery lists. One Thursday evening, she called with a vague excuse. "I have to fly out for a last-minute client meeting in Chicago. Don't wait up." The knot in Michael's stomach tightened. It was a feeling he couldn't explain, but one he couldn't ignore. Michael didn't confront her right away. Instead, he began paying closer attention. He noticed the faint scent of a man's cologne on her scarf, late-night texts she read behind a locked bathroom door, and phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room. A close friend who worked in IT helped him install discreet monitoring software on her laptop. He also managed to set up a mirrored SIM card to receive copies of her texts. Within 2 weeks, he had what he feared: flirtatious late-night messages with a coworker named Brandon from her Chicago office. Inside jokes, travel plans that didn't involve him, and phrases no married woman should be sending another man. Michael kept his composure. Every smile, every casual "How was your day?" was carefully staged. He didn't want Laura to know he had discovered anything. The more she felt safe, the more careless she became. He began building a dossier: screenshots of messages, phone call logs, even photos of her business trips, where she appeared with Brandon in bars and hotel lobbies. His friend in IT helped trace their shared ride receipts and credit card charges, placing them in the same hotels on the same nights. Michael wasn't just collecting evidence. He was waiting for the perfect opportunity, and in 2 months, it would arrive. Laura's birthday party. A gathering of friends, coworkers, and family. Michael rented a small private dining room at an upscale steakhouse in downtown Austin. He spared no expense: champagne, catered desserts, flowers. Laura thought it was a surprise celebration for her, but the real surprise wasn't for her benefit. A week before the party, Michael anonymously sent Brandon an invitation, making it look like it came from Laura. "She'll be thrilled you came," the note read. Brandon RSVP'd within an hour. Meanwhile, Michael compiled all the evidence into a sleek presentation, a series of slides with timestamps, photos, and message transcripts. He loaded it onto a discreet USB drive and tested the restaurant's projector. Everything worked flawlessly. The night of the party, Laura was glowing, dressed in a deep red cocktail dress, greeting guests with her usual charm. Halfway through the dinner, Michael stood up, tapped his glass, and said, "Before we cut the cake, I have a little slideshow to share, a celebration of the past year in Laura's life." The first few slides were innocent: vacation photos, dinners with friends. Laughter filled the room. Then the next image appeared: Laura in a hotel bar, leaning into Brandon's shoulder. Gasps. The next slide: intimate text exchanged late at night. Then receipts from business trips that matched Brandon's. The room fell silent. Brandon, sitting just a few seats away, turned pale. Laura's face drained of color. Michael ended the slideshow, raised his glass, and said calmly, "To truth, and to new beginnings." Then he walked out, leaving her to face the wreckage. Michael didn't look back as he stepped into the warm Austin night. Outside, the valet brought his car around, and the sound of muffled chaos from inside the restaurant faded with each passing second. He felt no guilt, only a strange, liberating calm. Within days, the fallout began. Laura's family was furious, not because Michael had exposed her, but because she had humiliated them in front of friends and relatives. Brandon's wife, yes, he had one, filed for divorce immediately after someone anonymously sent her the slideshow. Word spread quickly in the company, and both Laura and Brandon were quietly let go, under the guise of restructuring. Michael, on the other hand, was methodical about his next steps. His attorney filed for divorce citing infidelity, armed with airtight evidence that left Laura no leverage for alimony. He kept the house, the dog, and even the cabin in the hill country. Months later, Michael sat on the porch of that cabin, a cold beer in his hand, watching the Texas sunset. He wasn't in a rush to date again. For now, the silence and the wide-open skies were enough. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed, a reminder that life moves on, and sometimes, the sweetest revenge is walking away without a single scar. Laura avoided Austin for almost a year after that night. Every street corner, every familiar bar felt poisoned by whispers and stares. She moved to Dallas, telling people it was for a fresh start. But the truth was, she was running from the wreckage. Jobs were harder to find than she expected. Her reputation in the industry followed her. The slideshow had made its way into private group chats among colleagues, and no one wanted to risk hiring the woman from the party. Brandon was long gone, having fled to another state, leaving her with nothing but unanswered messages and a sick feeling in her chest. Sometimes, in the quiet of her small apartment, she replayed that moment, Michael standing in the center of the room, glass raised, his voice steady as the screen behind him destroyed her world. She wondered how long he had known, how many nights he had sat across from her, pretending everything was fine while sharpening the blade. And though she told herself she hated him for it, deep down, Laura knew the truth. Michael hadn't just ended their marriage. He had defined the rest of her life. A year later, on a warm autumn evening, Michael was sitting at a wine bar in Austin, flipping through a travel magazine. He had started taking trips across the country, hiking in Colorado, sailing in Florida, wine tours in California. Life felt lighter now, but he hadn't thought about Laura in months. Until he heard a familiar voice. He looked up and saw her, standing at the bar in a simple black dress, ordering a drink. She looked different, thinner, quieter somehow, but when their eyes met, time seemed to freeze. For a moment neither moved. Then she walked over, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Michael," she said softly, "can we talk?" He sipped his wine, looked her in the eye, and said, "There's nothing left to talk about." Then he stood, dropped a few bills on the table, and walked past her without another word. Laura watched him leave, feeling the same cold emptiness she'd felt the night of the party. Only now, it wasn't the shock of betrayal. It was the realization that he was truly, completely gone. And Michael? He didn't look back. Not once. Michael had always thought his marriage to Laura was unshakable. 8 years together, a cozy home in Austin, Texas, Sunday barbecues, movie nights, and annual road trips down the Pacific Coast Highway. But lately, something had shifted. Laura was suddenly working late, more often, sometimes not coming home until well after midnight. When she did, her voice was tired, her touch colder than usual. Conversations at the dinner table turned into brief exchanges about bills or grocery lists. One Thursday evening, she called with a vague excuse. "I have to fly out for a last-minute client meeting in Chicago. Don't wait up." The knot in Michael's stomach tightened. It was a feeling he couldn't explain, but one he couldn't ignore. He didn't confront her. Instead, he started paying attention. The faint scent of a man's cologne on her scarf. Texts she read behind a locked bathroom door. Phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room. A close friend in IT helped him install discreet monitoring software on her laptop. He also mirrored her SIM card. Within 2 weeks, the truth was in his hands. Late-night messages with a coworker named Brandon. Flirtations. Travel plans. Photos. Words no married woman should send another man. Michael didn't rage. He didn't cry. He just began planning. 2 months later, opportunity came. Laura's birthday. A big one. He rented a private dining room in an upscale steakhouse downtown. Champagne, flowers, desserts, the works. A week before, Michael anonymously invited Brandon, making it look like it came from Laura. Brandon RSVP'd without hesitation. Meanwhile, Michael compiled every piece of evidence into a slideshow, photos, screenshots, receipts, all neatly arranged, time-stamped, undeniable. The night arrived. Laura was radiant in a deep red dress, greeting friends and family with her usual charm. Halfway through dinner, Michael stood and tapped his glass. "Before we cut the cake," he said, "I put together a slideshow, a celebration of the past year in Laura's life." The first few images drew laughter, vacations, dinners, harmless memories. Then the next slide appeared, Laura in a hotel bar, leaning into Brandon's shoulder. Gasps. The next slide, intimate text messages. Then hotel receipts, ride shares, timestamp photos, all matching Brandon's business trips. The room fell silent. Brandon froze. Laura's face went pale. Michael closed the laptop, raised his glass, and said calmly, "To truth, and to new beginnings." And then he walked out. Within days, the fallout began. Laura's family was furious. Brandon's wife, yes, he had one, filed for divorce after someone sent her the slideshow. Both Laura and Brandon lost their jobs in a quiet restructuring. Michael's lawyer filed for divorce with airtight evidence. Laura had no leverage for alimony. He kept the house, the dog, and the cabin in the hill country. Laura tried to escape Austin, moving to Dallas for a fresh start, but whispers followed her. The slideshow spread through private chats. Brandon vanished to another state, leaving her with nothing but unanswered texts. At night, she would replay that moment in the restaurant, Michael standing calmly while her world fell apart, and wonder how long he had known. A year later, on a warm autumn evening, Michael was at a wine bar in Austin, flipping through a travel magazine. He had started taking trips again, hiking in Colorado, sailing in Florida, wine tours in California. Then he heard a voice. He looked up. Laura was at the bar in a black dress, ordering a drink. She looked thinner, older somehow. Their eyes met. Time froze. She walked over. "Michael," she said softly, "can we talk?" He took a slow sip of wine. "There's nothing left to talk about." He stood, left cash on the table, and walked past her without a glance. Laura watched him go, feeling the same cold emptiness as that night, only now, it wasn't shock. It was the realization that he was truly gone. Michael never looked back. 2 years later, Michael had almost forgotten Laura existed. He'd sold the Austin house, bought a lakeside property in Colorado, and opened a small outdoor gear shop. Life was quiet, steady, and honest, exactly how he wanted it. One snowy December afternoon, a woman walked in. At first, Michael didn't recognize her under the wool hat and scarf. But when she pulled them off, his stomach dropped. "Laura." She smiled faintly, as if unsure of her welcome. "I heard you were here," she said. "I needed some gear. I'm moving up to the mountains." Michael studied her. She looked older, the sparkle in her eyes replaced by something heavier, not bitterness, but exhaustion. He didn't say anything, just rang up the items. As she handed over her card, he noticed the name had changed. She'd gone back to her maiden name. No ring on her finger. "Thanks," she said softly. Then, just before walking out into the snow, she turned. "Michael, I never stopped thinking about that night." He paused, then replied evenly. "Neither did I. That's why I'll never let it happen again." Laura stood there for a moment, then nodded, almost as if she agreed. And then she was gone, swallowed by the white haze outside, leaving Michael with the quiet certainty that some stories don't end. They just drift apart forever. 2 weeks after Laura walked into Michael's shop, he was closing up for the night when he noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Its engine was running, but no one got out. The next day, it was there again. And the day after that. On the fourth night, as Michael stepped outside with the trash, the SUV's driver's side door opened. A tall man in a dark coat got out and walked toward him. His voice was low, deliberate. "Where's Laura?" Michael froze. "Haven't seen her." The man smirked. "She owes someone a lot of money. And not the kind you can walk away from." He stepped closer. "If she shows up here again, you call me." He slipped a card into Michael's jacket pocket and got back into the SUV. Michael went inside, locked the door, and stared at the card. No name, just a phone number and the symbol of a black spade. He hadn't seen Laura in years, but now, whatever mess she'd gotten into, it had followed her into his world. And something told him it wouldn't just disappear. It was 3 days after the man in the SUV appeared when Laura came back. This time, she didn't look exhausted, she looked terrified. Her eyes darted around the shop before she locked the door behind her. "They found me," she whispered. Michael didn't need to ask who. He poured himself a coffee, leaning against the counter. "Why are they looking for you, Laura?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "I was in Chicago, after the divorce. I started working for a real estate company. But it wasn't just real estate. They laundered money. Millions. I took some of it, not a lot, but enough for them to want me dead." Michael laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So you dragged that trouble here?" Her voice cracked. "I didn't know where else to go." Before he could answer, headlights flashed through the shop window, the black SUV. It pulled up right in front, engine rumbling. 2 men got out this time. Laura's hands trembled. "Please, Michael, if you ever loved me, just help me this once." He stared at her for a long moment. Part of him wanted to open the door and let them take her. But another part, the one that remembered the years before the betrayal, tightened its grip on the coffee cup. Finally, he set it down. "Go out the back. Now." Laura bolted toward the rear exit as the men banged on the front door. Michael reached under the counter and pulled out something he hadn't touched in years, his old .45. The past had just caught up with both of them. The back doors slammed behind them, the frigid mountain air burning Michael's lungs. Snow was falling hard now, thick flakes swirling under the glow of the single street lamp. Laura was already running toward the tree line behind the shop. "They'll see our tracks," she hissed. Michael caught up, pulling her toward a narrow service road that led uphill. "We can lose them in the storm, if you keep moving." Behind them, the SUV's engine roared. Headlights cut through the swirling snow as it turned into the alley. Shouts followed. The men had spotted them. They pushed deeper into the woods, branches clawing at their jackets. The snowstorm worsened, visibility shrinking to barely 10 feet. Michael knew the terrain. The frozen creek ahead would mask their footprints for a while. They reached it, and he pulled her onto the ice. "Stay close to the edge," he whispered. "And don't talk." For nearly an hour, they moved silently through the blizzard, hearing the distant crunch of boots behind them. Then, a crack. The ice beneath Laura's foot gave way, plunging her leg into freezing water. Michael grabbed her before she could scream, hauling her onto solid ground. "You can't make noise," he said sharply. Her teeth were chattering, lips pale. "We can't keep running. We don't have a choice," Michael replied, glancing back into the white void. Somewhere out there, their hunters were closing in. And the storm was getting worse. Through the thick curtain of snow, a dark shape emerged, a small, weather-beaten cabin half buried in drifts. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney, and the windows were boarded on the inside. Michael pushed the door open with his shoulder. It groaned but gave way, revealing a single room, a cold iron stove, a cot, and shelves of dust-covered cans. It smelled of wood rot and old pine. Laura collapsed onto the cot, shivering violently. Michael found a stack of logs by the stove and lit a fire. Soon the room filled with the faint warmth of burning cedar. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said without looking at her. "Or you won't make it till morning." As she changed under a blanket, Michael took the .45 from his jacket and set it on the table. He kept glancing out the small crack between the boards covering the window. No movement yet, but he knew they'd keep tracking. When he finally sat down, Laura broke the silence. "You think I'm lying to you. I think you're not telling me the whole story," Michael said evenly. She stared into the fire. "Fine. It wasn't just money laundering. I was moving information, names, bank accounts, offshore transfers. And I didn't just take cash. I took data. Data worth more than all the money they were moving combined. Michael's stomach tightened. And where is it now? Her eyes met his. In a place they'll kill both of us to reach. Outside, the sound of crunching snow grew louder. Footsteps. The footsteps stopped just outside the cabin. Michael motioned for Laura to stay low and silently moved to the door, pressing his ear against the cold wood. A man's voice called out, calm but cutting through the storm. Michael, we just want her. You hand her over, you walk away. No harm done. Michael didn't answer. He glanced at Laura. Her face was pale, but her eyes were locked on the gun on the table. Another voice joined in, harsher. You've got 1 minute before we come in. And trust me, you don't want us coming in. Michael's mind raced. The cabin had only one exit, the front door. The boarded windows might give them cover, but the walls were thin. If they started shooting, it would turn into a slaughter. He stepped to the table, slid the .45 into his hand, and handed Laura a hunting knife from the shelf. If they get inside, you aim for the throat, he whispered. The first blow hit the door, shaking the frame. Then another. Snow dust fell from the rafters. Michael! The first voice shouted again. 10 seconds! Michael took a deep breath, stepped back from the door, and aimed. The moment the lock splintered, he fired twice. Muffled screams. Boots crunching away in the snow. For a moment, there was silence, until he realized the retreat wasn't fear. It was repositioning. They're circling, Michael muttered. We've got minutes, maybe less. Laura's voice was almost a whisper. Then we take the fight to them. Michael looked at her, and for the first time in years, he saw the same fierce spark she'd had before the lies. The storm outside howled like a warning. Michael killed the fire, plunging the cabin into darkness. The glow from the cracks in the boards faded, replaced by the swirling white chaos of the storm outside. He nodded toward the back wall. There's a loose panel. Leads to the crawl space. We can get out without them seeing. Laura slipped the knife into her boot while Michael checked the .45, 3 rounds left. Not enough for a prolonged fight. They crawled through the narrow gap, emerging behind the cabin. The wind cut like glass, but it masked their movements. Shapes moved in the blizzard, 3 men, spaced in a half-circle around the front. Michael motioned for Laura to flank left. She hesitated only a second before disappearing into the whiteout. A figure loomed ahead of Michael, back turned. He stepped silently, pressed the gun to the man's neck, and fired once. The body crumpled into the snow. From the left came a sudden, muffled cry, Laura. Michael spun, seeing her struggling with a second man. She drove the knife upward, and he went limp. The third man's shout cut through the storm. They're behind us! He raised his rifle, but Michael's last 2 shots dropped him before he could fire. Silence settled over the clearing, broken only by the howl of the wind. The snow was already covering the bodies. Laura's breath came in sharp bursts. We have to move! They're not the only ones after me. Michael stared at her, chest heaving. Then you'd better start explaining everything, while we still have time. And as they vanished into the blizzard, Michael realized this wasn't the end. This was just the next chapter of a game he hadn't chosen to play. They moved through the storm for hours, the world reduced to white noise and shadows. By dawn, they reached the edge of a frozen valley. Below, a small service station sat beside an empty highway, the only sign of civilization for miles. Michael scanned the horizon. We can't stay in the open. Where's this data you stole? Laura's lips were blue from the cold. Denver. In a safe deposit box under a false name. Michael's jaw tightened. And you didn't think to mention that before people started trying to kill us? I didn't trust you, she admitted. But now, you've seen what they'll do to get it. We need to move fast. They slipped into the service station, grabbing coffee and warming up near a dusty heater. The old clerk barely looked at them. Laura leaned in, speaking low. There's more. The data isn't just bank accounts. It's a list of shell companies tied to politicians, judges, people who could bury this whole thing if they knew I had it. Michael exhaled slowly. So this isn't about money. It's about power. Before she could answer, the glass door jingled. 2 men walked in, not the same crew from the cabin, but they had the same cold, searching eyes. Michael's hand drifted toward the .45 under his jacket. Laura gripped his arm. We can't fight them here. Too many witnesses. Michael glanced at the reflection in the freezer door. The men were splitting up, one heading for the counter, the other toward the back exit. They were being boxed in. Michael didn't wait for the trap to close. He tipped his coffee over, the scalding liquid splashing across the floor between him and the man by the back exit. The guy flinched, and Michael shoved Laura toward the front. Go. Now. They pushed past the other man at the counter, sending a rack of chips crashing to the floor. The clerk shouted, but Michael was already throwing open the door to the blinding morning glare. The SUV they'd stolen from the cabin's attackers sat idling in the lot, still half covered in snow. Michael jumped in, gunned the engine, and the tires screamed against the ice. In the rearview, the 2 men burst out of the station and into a black pickup truck. Buckle up, Michael muttered. The narrow mountain road wound along a frozen river, cliffs rising on one side, a sheer drop on the other. The pickup was gaining, its headlights flickering through the powder kicked up by their wheels. Laura clutched the dash. They'll force us off the road. Not if they don't have a road, Michael replied, yanking the wheel. He cut down a snow-covered service trail, the SUV bouncing violently over hidden rocks. The pickup followed, fishtailing wildly. Up ahead, the trail ended at a narrow wooden bridge, half buried in snow and sagging under its own weight. Laura's eyes went wide. It won't hold. It only has to hold once. Michael cut in, flooring it. They hit the bridge at 40 miles per hour, the timbers groaning under the weight. Behind them, the pickup roared onto it, just as the structure gave way. The sound of splintering wood echoed across the valley. Michael didn't slow down. Next stop, Denver. By the time they reached Denver, the storm was behind them, but danger wasn't. Michael parked the SUV 3 blocks from the downtown bank. Crowds moved along the sidewalks, their chatter blending with the sound of traffic. The city felt alive. But it was the kind of alive that could swallow you without a trace. Laura kept her hood low. The box is under the name Hannah Blake. I'll need you inside as backup. If anything goes wrong. Something will go wrong, Michael interrupted. That's the point. Inside, the bank's warmth was deceptive. A polished floor, quiet music, smiling tellers. But Michael's eyes kept scanning. A man in a gray suit reading a newspaper without turning the page. A woman at the far desk pretending to write something while glancing at them in the reflection of a picture frame. Laura signed the form, her hand steady despite the tension. The clerk led them into the vault, cool air, the faint scent of metal and oil. Box 214. Laura slid the key in, lifted the lid, and froze. Inside wasn't just a flash drive. There was also a folded note. Michael took it and read. You're already too late. We're here. The vault door slammed. Footsteps echoed behind them. The man in the gray suit. The woman from the desk. And 2 more, all armed, blocking the only exit. Laura whispered. Michael! He took a deep breath, weighing the odds. They weren't good. The man in the gray suit smiled. You've had a long drive. Why don't we discuss who really owns that data? Michael's mind calculated distances, angles, and the weight of the .45 under his coat. Too many guns pointed at them. Not enough cover. The man in the gray suit stepped closer. Let's be civil. Hand over the flash drive, and maybe you walk out breathing. Laura's voice was ice. If you kill us, the copies get sent. You know that, right? That earned a small smile. Ah, yes, the mythical dead man's switch. Problem is, we've been tracking your devices since Wyoming. No signals going anywhere. Michael's eyes flicked around the vault, rows of small boxes, one overhead security camera, and in the corner, a red fire suppression panel. "Laura," he said quietly, "how do you feel about smoke?" She glanced at him, caught the look, and nodded. In one swift motion, Michael yanked a metal box from the shelf and hurled it into the fire panel. Glass shattered. A high-pitched alarm shrieked as white vapor began to pour from the ceiling vents. "Gas!" one of the armed men shouted. Panic broke their formation. Michael fired twice, the shots deafening in the enclosed space. Laura dove behind the central table, clutching the flash drive. The gray suit lunged, but Michael drove an elbow into his throat and sent him crashing into a row of boxes. Visibility dropped to zero as the vapor filled the vault. Michael grabbed Laura's wrist. "Move!" They stumbled toward the door, but as they reached it, a silhouette loomed in the fog, a gun raised directly at Michael's chest. The muzzle was inches from Michael's sternum. He could barely see the figure's face through the swirling vapor, but he caught the glint of eyes that weren't panicked. They were calm. Professional. "Drop it," the voice said, low and steady. Female. Laura's breath caught. "You." Michael didn't drop the gun. He shifted his stance slightly, forcing the woman to adjust her aim. A half-second window, but half-seconds were what he'd lived on for years. He slammed his left hand into her wrist, twisting the gun away as his right brought the .45 up. The shot was muffled by the vapor but still cracked through the vault. The woman staggered back, clutching her arm. The vapor was thinning now, enough for Michael to see her clearly. Early 40s, sharp cheekbones, dark hair pulled into a severe bun. And on her blazer, a small silver pin in the shape of an eagle clutching a key. Laura's eyes widened. "She's not just a hitter, she's federal." The woman's lips curled in a cold smile despite the pain. "You have no idea how far this goes." "That drive you're holding? It's not just names. It's the kill list." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had triggered the bank's alarms. Michael grabbed Laura's arm. "Then we better make sure we're not on it." They bolted past the woman, through the vault door, and into the chaos of the main lobby. But as they hit the street, Michael spotted something that made his stomach drop: black SUVs lining both ends of the block. They weren't escaping the easy way. The SUV's engines rumbled, the sound like a warning growl. Doors opened in unison, and men in dark tactical gear stepped out, their movements crisp, practiced. Michael pulled Laura into a narrow alley before the first shout hit the air. "South side! Move!" They sprinted, weaving between dumpsters and fire escapes, boots splashing through puddles left by yesterday's rain. Michael's brain mapped the city grid on the fly. He'd never been to Denver, but streets had patterns, and patterns could save lives. They ducked into the back entrance of a laundromat. Inside, the hum of machines masked their breathing. An old man behind the counter didn't even look up. Michael stripped off his jacket, reversed it inside out to dull the color, and handed Laura a baseball cap from a lost and found bin. "Blend. Don't run unless I tell you." They walked out the front, merging into a crowd waiting at a bus stop. Across the street, two agents scanned faces, but their eyes slid past Michael and Laura. For a second, Michael thought they'd slipped the net. Then his phone, one he hadn't used since Wyoming, buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. One message. "Stop running. We see you." Laura's hand tightened on his. "They're still tracking us." Michael scanned the street. Above them, a CCTV camera turned slightly, too deliberately. "Then we go dark," he said, pulling her toward a side street. "No phones. No cameras. No patterns." From the rooftops, a figure watched them leave, speaking into an earpiece. "Target's moving east. Orders?" A voice crackled back. "Follow, but don't engage. We want them alive." They ended up in an abandoned rail yard on Denver's outskirts, wind cutting sharp through rusted freight cars. No phones. No witnesses. Just steel, shadows, and the thud of their own footsteps. Michael slowed, raising a hand. "We're not alone." Out of the darkness, 6 figures emerged, black-clad, weapons holstered but visible. The woman from the vault was among them, her arm now in a sling. "You've been hard to catch," she said, her voice carrying easily in the empty yard. "But we didn't come to kill you." Michael kept his gun low but ready. "Then why?" A man stepped forward. Expensive suit, clean cut, eyes that smiled without warmth. "Because, Mr. Reed, you're wasted as an enemy. You've proven resourceful, unpredictable. We like that." Laura's voice was steady. "And if we say no?" The man glanced around at the silent perimeter. "Then you disappear. And in a month your faces will be on news reports tied to a fabricated domestic terror plot. Your friends will grieve. Your enemies will celebrate. And the truth will be buried under a dozen sealed files." Michael's jaw tightened. "You're offering a job." "Not a job," the man corrected. "A seat at the table." Laura's hand found Michael's, and in that moment neither of them spoke, but they both knew the choice was poison either way. Michael took a slow step forward. "If we do this, we set our own rules." The man's smile widened just enough to show teeth. "Of course. Until you break them." A distant freight horn echoed through the yard as Michael and Laura followed them into the shadows, the flash drive still burning like a brand in Laura's pocket. They weren't free. They weren't safe. But they were still alive, and sometimes, that's the only currency that counts.